Today I am joined by the ladies from Chronic Joy. It's a ministry that provides resources to individuals and families who live with chronic illness. And they also have resources for churches and ministries that support those families living with chronic illness. So, today I'd like to welcome Pamela and Cindy from Chronic Joy. So ladies, thanks so much for joining us. And we were just talking before we jumped on the air that you guys are in Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so tell me just a little bit, if you will, about the kind of the backstory of the ministry, like how it came to even be a ministry, and I'm sure that both of you have a story to share in this.
Well, we sort of just narrowed it down because you had so many great questions for us, but both of us have significant long-term chronic illness, and so do our children. So
Okay.
we began looking for tools, connections, groups within churches for those affected by chronic illness. And sadly, we didn't find a single church with resources, groups for kids with illness, nor for adults. So since our search sort of left us without, we really sensed God's call to take a step toward beginning a ministry. God seemed to be just waiting for us to take a step of faith, because he really has moved mountains that on our own, we would still be trying to scale.
That's really cool. Yeah. So how did you get started? Did you start working with individual families? Did you start working with other, not-for-profits, or were you doing something in your own churches? How did you get this thing going?
Well, we started by talking to our church, and it's a very good-sized church at the time, and their inclination is that our vision was far beyond what the walls of their church could manage. They felt it, and so that kind of gave us a little disappointment, because we had this idea that we'd maybe have a little Bible study, but it also gave us a push to think bigger, and that was a little scary, and so we just started a website, started posting on social media, and before long, we started January 1st of 2016 with this really clear vision from God that this is what we were supposed to do. And by mid-April, we had our letter of determination. And let's just be honest, Cindy and I knew nothing about writing bylaws and all the things that go along with becoming a nonprofit. We have no special skill. So God had to move some mountains to have that to happen.
Well, I'm sure that you guys are far more skilled than you're giving yourselves credit to be. But
we have grown in skill.
We
did not start with any.
Well, and it's always good when we're growing, right? I mean,
Yes.
a wise ministry friend told me years ago that God usually gives you everything you need to get started when he calls you to something, whether it's the people or the vision or the provision. And I mean, clearly it sounds like that's what happened with you guys, because it is amazing to get that determination letter really quickly. So that's tremendous. So your ministry helps families who are living with chronic illness. And so when I hear that term, I think, well, okay, isn't all disability chronic illness? But that's not necessarily the case. So how do you differentiate between, what disability is and what a chronic illness is? And this can just be your definition. It doesn't have to be what's in the dictionary.
No, it is. Because, interestingly enough, this is a question and a thought that we wrestle with this in variations, from time to time. And really the answer still surprises us even a bit. We really don't differentiate.
Okay.
Our role often has been to help shift and broaden perspectives. Chronic Joy is a ministry of compassion, inclusion, and relationship. And so often, instead of differences, we have so much more in common than we may have imagined. For example, Catherine, when you and I first talked, you mentioned that many folks have hidden disabilities.
Right.
We use the words invisible illness.
Mm-hmm.
At the core, aren't these simply different words describing similar ideas?
Right.
And so Cindy and I are both kind of wordsmiths, so we picked apart disability, and at its core, it just simply means lack of ability.
Mm-hmm.
then we look at the word chronic, which means persisting for a long time. And in terms of illness, chronic is often considered something that lasts longer than 3 months.
Okay.
Disability, by cultural definition, is a long-term and often might be a permanent lack of ability. So to me, it makes sense to a more accurate idea might be chronic disability. But no matter what the words, ultimately, illness and disability impact the individual and all of those who love him or her. Mm-hmm. When I spoke at a local church, to really bring this idea home, they were asked to stand if any of the following were true. If you or someone you love lives with chronic illness, if you or a loved one has mental illness, something like anxiety or depression, if you're the parent of a sick child, if you provide care for someone who has illness, and if you've lost a loved one impacted by chronic illness. And then I asked them to look around the room. Almost the entire congregation was standing, right, because chronic illness really impacts all of us.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very much so. And, you know, it doesn't have to be something, like you said, that you can visibly see. I mean, there's so many illnesses that are, I mean, we're fortunate that we understand now that there are so many things that are brain-based illnesses and that may or may not be reflected in our abilities. But they are going to have an impact on the person's life who's living with it and those who love the person. So
Cindy has some great examples to illustrate that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I think that it's the difficulties of accessibility for both those with disability, either mental or physical, and chronic illness, either mental or physical, chronic illness. And that's something. I have 5 kids. 4 of my kids, they're all adults now, between 19 and 27, have a life-altering chronic illness. And so I watch this lack of accessibility almost every day. And it is in things like colleges. What do you tell your roommate? I have a daughter who plays college sports, or did play college sports before COVID. And it was, how much did she tell her coach and her trainers she doesn't want special treatment, and yet in order to be able to participate well and be an asset to the team, they need to understand what they're dealing with. It is workplaces. I have all 3 of my daughters deal with chronic migraine, and so it's watching them try to work an entire shift with raging 3-day migraine. And it's how much do you tell your boss? How do you not? So it's trying to help the world become more accessible, but it's also trying to help those with disability or illness understand how to have those conversations so that they can clearly articulate what they need. Right. And then on the other side, we can start to build programs that actually work functionally for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, you just had so much in there. Goodness, I mean, to be able to disclose or not disclose is a huge issue. For really with mental type illnesses of every kind. So those were just some excellent points. So you guys have a lot of resources. So what are some things that you have either found or you have developed that have been really helpful, maybe even in your own lives? You mentioned that you have 4 kids that have chronic illnesses. What are some things that have been really helpful, either from a practical perspective or from a spiritual, a spiritual health kind of perspective?
That's really who we are in essence. I mean, everything that we have available on our website, every book that we have, every recommendation, every website that we point folks towards, every printable that we have is really intended to do exactly what you asked. How do we practically minister to one another, and how do we offer encouragement based? Part of it's based on our experience, and it continues to be based on that. The more that we dig deep into what those things mean, those are where people are looking for that next step. How do I live well in the midst of?
Right. Well, so I mean,
I
feel
think
free to
part
go
of it,
ahead and show a
Catherine,
few things that that you have, available that you think have been, maybe some of the more, requested or, that are in, in broad use. Because I'm sure that people who are watching this or are checking out your website maybe for the first time are wondering, okay, I live with a chronic illness. What resources do you have, to maybe, support me tangibly or to support me spiritually?
So, the first step for many folks, at least that's where we began, was we felt like we wanted folks to figure out, to some degree, their own story, to work through that hard, to sort of work through the grief. And so Cindy went right to work and wrote the first book in our Thrive study series called Discovering Hope.
Okay.
And this book, it can be worked on as an individual. We always encourage groups, even if it's one other person, because we find a new perspective as we look through our own story, where God has been faithful,
Okay.
where the heart has opened our eyes to seeing joy in the midst. I think we can all relate now to those moments where heart is most like COVID right now. Many people are finding that being home is hard. But in the midst of that hard, my example would be, there's a bird's nest outside my window, and I have watched the mama bird sit for the first time, and I saw the blue eggs and the egg hatched.
Oh,
We don't always notice those things.
right.
But when life slows down and we take time to work through the hard, we also notice the joy in the midst.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's excellent.
And another piece, though, we are really practical people. I mean, that is just the heart of who we are. So this is just one piece of paper, but we have all kinds of free printables that
Okay.
are guides that you can have at your fingertips to walk you through just a variety of different things, from lament, where you might work through the hard in your life. You might work through, we have something called, I'm losing my train of thought, the build your bucket list. Things that you can look forward to. What do I really want to do? Even though life is meant hard, maybe chronic illness is definitely, the migraines are raging, but what small things might I really enjoy doing that I hadn't thought about in a long time?
Yeah, we have, one of our writing team members wrote a blog post this week about, we choose how, basically how we think about our days. We may not be able to choose what our days are filled with, whether it's chronic illness or, being in the hospital with a loved one, but we can choose to find those moments of joy and the things that God is placing before us that, that can, show that, his fingertips are on our lives, even in the midst of the hard. So, yeah, working through the hard, that's a really excellent concept. And thank you for bringing that up. So you mentioned that, life has slowed down, and for people living with chronic illness, life may already have been slow. I mean, we've talked about in some of our previous webinars and definitely our other blog posts and resources that many families who live with disabilities or long-term type illnesses really have not had maybe dramatic change in their lifestyle because of all of the COVID stuff, and in some ways have really been the teachers for those of us who have been more used to going out and certainly not having limitations on our travel or feeling like we we shouldn't be going out because of fear of getting sick or getting other people sick. So are there any tools or initiatives or blog posts, anything that you all have developed this year or directed people to who are struggling with all of the COVID limitations, or maybe have gotten COVID themselves, or are really struggling with anxiety and depression through this time, as so many people are?
So in terms of it's based specifically on because of COVID, the answer would probably be no. We are always in the midst of some next initiative. There's lots of projects in motion. And so we're often so blessed that, we sort of complete something and get it ready to go. And it was just the right timing. It wasn't one I anticipated talking about, but when you brought up the idea of anxiety, we see that that is just becoming a very prevalent challenge today.
Right.
There's so many things that are hard with that. And so a page that on our website that, sort of began getting us thinking about it really got fleshed out recently. And the resources on that page and the encouragement to work through the anxiety, the touchstones that helped you to do that are now really right at your fingertips, not only printable, but on a web page. We're also in progress. I guess the only initiative that may have come out now that I can't relate it to COVID, but the timing is right here. We really have felt a call to make things even more accessible, if that's possible. And so we're trying to broaden and understand what that means. And as we do so, we've begun adding audio to as many things as we can do, over time. The blog posts that have gone out this week all have an audio version of it right at the top. So if life is hard and you're not able to read, or if you just feel so isolated and so alone, just hearing the voice of someone who's recorded their post, even people when they send them to me, there's a little mistake in there. Do you want me to record it again? Or I've missed something. And I'm like, no, that's the part that makes it real. It's a real voice. It's not computer generated. And so this is literally happening overnight. We just started the idea and everybody is very excited to come alongside. We even have extra readers if someone doesn't want to do that. So those kind of accessible things really have just taken off on their own, and we just sort of follow wherever God leads.
That's a great idea. And honestly, that's not something that we're doing, but it's really quite thoughtful of people who may, be visually impaired or, for whatever reason. You mentioned migraine headaches. I mean, I get migraine headaches. It's very difficult to read when you're having a migraine. So, I mean, that's a tremendously good idea. I mean, I love when we were talking before, Pamela, you just have so many, great little unique ideas that are especially just so practical in this time when, churches have gone so online and they're trying to figure out how to continue that practical, hands-on kind of personal touch with people. And it's been really a challenge, but there's been tremendous creativity that has come forth too. And you guys are just a little ahead of the pack of the rest of us trying to figure this out with all the COVID challenges. Well, I just want to put a little shout out here. If you have any questions for Pamela and Cindy, if you're looking for resources of any kind for individuals or families living with chronic illnesses, please feel free to share a question in the chat, or if you're on Facebook, please feel free to ask a question there, and we'll definitely get that to Pamela and Cindy so they can answer. So,
Catherine, Cindy, and we're just dying to tell you, we have some of our favorite practical things because you asked some specific questions, but would it be all right if we told you a few of our, singing that song, a few of our favorite things?
Absolutely.
We love everything on our website, let's just be clear, but the ones that have touched our hearts specifically. So we love to send old school pen to paper envelopes filled with inspiring content to those in our community, from our youngest at age 3 to our teens and young adults, our adults, those with illness, caregivers, parents. We even encourage those who are married. When folks receive, and I have a little, it's hard to see, but I tried to put together a little pen to paper packet. When they receive a beautiful card with encouragement, not only for themselves, but there's also cards in there that they can pay that forward by sending encouragement on to those they love. It just makes a difference. Great. We just receive such great feedback that opening their mailboxes and finding our envelope just really helps the loss, the isolation, the loneliness, the feeling forgotten about. Well, some of that just melts away. And our latest mailing will be hitting mailboxes later this week. And we're excited. At this point, we have 800 people who will know that we are thinking about and praying for them. And
Wow.
those 800 people will have the opportunity to encourage 2 people with their cards of their own. So it's just such a great way to not only we love on them, but they have the opportunity to serve and love someone else.
Well, can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
800 people?
Yes.
Is it just the 2 of you who are sending these to 800 people?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. That's really impressive. I think you need to get a little army of volunteers to help you guys to come alongside, because that is a lot of work.
Well, and the exciting thing is we do that several times a year, not
Okay.
just once.
Okay.
And we've got separate packets for our little ones that include coloring sheets and a really adorable little star note card designed by one of the women in our ministry. And then we've got specific things for our younger teens and a whole packet that goes out to our young adults and early 20-somethings.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
they're really tailored to fit all of those groups specifically. And it's always free. Early on in the ministry, Pam had looked at me and she said, you know, we can't outgive God, but we can sure try.
Right.
And
Right.
almost 5 years later, I mean, that's something that it's such an encouragement to us to do that it brings probably as much joy to us as it does to those who receive it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful. So you're doing this
personal too, right? Because you know, as you grow and you get bigger, you don't always know everyone who's in your list.
right.
But it reminds you that this is one precious life, and we have the opportunity to impact that person today. So not only do those cards go out and all the pieces that go with it, there's also the prayer that goes along with it.
Right.
And that's probably the most significant part, is we pray for the folks in our community. And that's a second favorite I'm just going to jump into quick, but we launched something called the Prayer Pond. And so even though COVID has kept lots of folks at home, for many of us that are affected by chronic illness, not too much has changed. So while this is the reality, we all long for community. And one way we can practically offer that touch point is our Prayer Pond, which not only invites folks to share prayer requests, it provides them an opportunity to do something that we like to call pray it forward by praying for other requests. And the part that touches folks so much is that when you click the button that says, I prayed for this, if the requester is opted for notifications, they're going to get a little note that says, someone just prayed for you. That email with those few words just has a way of arriving at just the right time. It offers practical and tangible way that we can minister to one another from wherever we are, however we're able.
That's a fabulous idea. So how do you have any gauge of how many prayer requests you have had prayed for, and since you've been doing the Prayer Pond?
I'm thinking about, like, there's pages on the backside of the website, how many pages of folks there are. And I have not counted since we began, but I would guess there's probably 1,000 people.
Wow.
That had requests.
That's fabulous.
That's, some of them are multiple.
That is so encouraging. It's particularly when people opt to get that notification that people are praying for them. I mean, that lifts you right there. What a great idea.
At the right time. There was a blog post this last week where someone shared a request that she had put out some time ago, kind of, because it's the next one that comes to the top. So they, pre-fills a page. And she was at the emergency room like a month after that had been posted. And in the emergency room, someone was praying for that old request.
Wow.
That's why I said these hit at times that it's just amazing that it's just so God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really awesome. He is so good to us. It's amazing. A couple of folks are saying that they love the ideas. And somebody said that they're praying for you, Cindy. Cindy has a migraine today, so she's struggling a little bit. So, that's appreciate you being here when you're not feeling well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, well, we'll definitely mention some of these resources on the link to the video when this is posted. And just again, for everybody watching, we record this. The video will be shared on the Key Ministry Vimeo and YouTube channels. And we'll also be sharing it with the ladies from Chronic Joy so that they can post it on their social media and website as well. So you can see what we talked about in the description.
I'd love for Cindy to tell you just quick about the images. She typically is the one who does a lot of our images.
Okay.
Yes, something exciting that we have available for individuals and for churches are thousands of images that are all available for free download. From the very beginning, we started to put out at least one image a day. A lot of them in the early years were my images as a photographer, and they have now since grown to include lots of different people's images that are really stunning. But they're encouraging, they're inspiring, they talk about prayer, and we offer them to church leaders. They can show them on the big screen, they can be sent out to their people. They're great for people to text to one another, to offer that, just a little encouragement or inspiration, or that notification that, hey, I prayed for you today, and here's something I thought you might enjoy. People can share them on their social media. So it's just a really nice option when you're not really sure what to say on your own.
So did you take most of the photographs?
In the early years, yes, I
Okay.
did. Probably the first 2.5 years of the ministry. And then I kind of ran out of my log of photos.
Right.
So we started to use photos from other people.
Well, and I mean, we've done research on, what speaks to the people who follow our work, and inspirational images are very important. I mean, they can be very powerful reminders that God is with you and is walking alongside you through whatever storm you're enduring. So, I mean, we're always on the hunt for things that, speak to those who follow the work that we do. So I may be accessing some of your photos as well.
We would love to share them with you.
Well, we got a question.
One of the things I wanted to mention was, I think that art, or beauty in particular, has a way of touching us in ways that we may not anticipate when we're kind of beyond words. I know that for me, when my daughters used to do back-to-back weeks in the hospital for some infusions that were really difficult and made them incredibly sick, their children's hospital had these beautiful frosted windows, and the light coming through there was extraordinary. And I would shoot pictures there because I needed some way to step out of the medical long enough to reground myself so that I had the strength to meet my kids in where they in what they needed me to do during that time. And I just think that we need to always surround ourselves with that beauty and that creativity that comes from the hand of God.
Well, and that's an excellent point. We talk a fair amount on our blogs and our social media about self-care, because it's really impossible to be a good caregiver unless you're taking care of yourself first. In fact, a couple of months ago, we had one of these webinars where we talked with a ministry leader at Liquid Church in Metro New York City, which has seen so many cases of COVID, and they're doing so much to help support the communities in that area that have the COVID and the massive unemployment, and they went through a whole series with their entire leadership team, both the paid staff at the church as well as all their ministry leaders, called Put Your Own Mask On First. And so, I mean, just even, carving out what will feed your soul, will help you reconnect with God. And those really difficult moments can just be life-giving and life-sustaining in those really difficult days. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we got a question in the Facebook Live. Let's see. How can, let's see. Do you have any resources specifically that equip churches to come alongside families? I mean, it sounds like everything you have can be adapted by churches, but I'm just wondering if you have created certain tools that, you know, are either more requested by churches than individuals, or that you share with churches, thinking that they're more designed for what churches are equipping people to do.
We do actually. In fact, we have an entire page on our website dedicated to churches and
Okay.
small group leaders, church leadership, and it includes everything they really need to start a ministry to their own people. What we learned early on is that every church has, the people in every church have a different need for different services or different accommodations. And it's important that the conversation starts between the church leadership and the people in the church. So we walk them through, there's a flyer that we have called Build an Illness Ministry, and it walks them through everything from how to begin the conversation to how to build a mission and vision statement, to choosing resources, to the kinds of things they want to think about, like how long are these meetings going to be? Are they going to be held every week? Can you do them virtually? All the different pieces. And then it wraps up with, we have created a small group leader guide called Grace, Truth, and Time that are designed specifically to help people lead these groups. So yes, in answer to that question, what we felt early on was that churches don't have the bandwidth in a lot of cases. They have the desire to do something. They don't necessarily know what to do, and they can't really take in another program that they have to run. So we wanted it to be more organic and more built for what every church can do.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, a group that Key Ministry is part of, I remember a couple of years ago, they were talking about how, you know, the greatest untapped asset in every church is the people, you know, and you have many people who are willing and able to do something to serve others in their community, but they may not know how to get started. And like you said, I mean, the church leadership, particularly in times like this that are so challenging for everyone, they may not have any more hours in the day to be able to take something on. And you know, whenever churches are starting something new, you know, you've got the two thoughts, you know, what's it going to cost? And, you know, how am I going to run it? And, you know, anything that has a big price tag or, you know, additional staff attached to it, that's very difficult for most churches, especially now, to be able to take on. So, you know, having something that's really turnkey is very helpful.
The other piece of that I think was so important is we ran for almost a year, we ran 2 surveys, one for individuals asking them how does your church come alongside, or what would you want them to do that they haven't done? And then for churches, what do you see the needs of your people as being? And the overwhelming thing that we learned from individuals is that the majority of people who filled those out all want to serve. They can't necessarily serve in traditional ways, but they want to serve. They're just looking for creative opportunities to do that. And we took that information and we developed some pieces on how to serve creatively so that we understand that that sense of purpose and value and personal worth comes in part from being connected in an integral way to the body of Christ. And that the body of Christ is incomplete without even one of us, you know, there. So it's how to take the inherent skills that everybody has or gifts, and it can be very small and it can be very sporadic, but it's no less valuable and important to the body of Christ.
Right. So, I mean, I love that you guys focus that way, because that's something that, you know, we talk about a fair amount, is making sure that you're involving everybody and, you know, helping churches see that people who have disabilities, you know, and maybe it's easier with someone who has obvious disabilities, that person still has something very important to contribute to the body of Christ. And even if we can't come along come up with, a service opportunity that, maybe it's a person who is nonverbal and, it is a severely disabled child, but that child reminds us of, the image of God, that every person is made in the image of God, and that there is inherent dignity and value in that life. It can be quite profound to start thinking about, what is that person's gift to the body of Christ. So what are some ways?
Quote that I just think fits here, because it really does sum up that idea that no matter how we're able to serve, if it's in non-traditional ways and not culturally familiar, there's always something we each have to give. And that this quote from Mother Teresa really sums that up. It's the simple, small ways where we have a big impact. And her quote says, "Every time you smile at someone, it is an action of love, a gift to that person, a beautiful thing." Who would have thought, really, that a smile is serving? And I think sometimes we look too big, and it's really the small things.
Right. Yeah, that's excellent. Well, so what are some, for people who live maybe with chronic pain, what have you recommended to folks who are, just in pain a lot, and it's hard for them to maybe move or to do, to do very much? I mean, are there some things that you have recommended? I mean, certainly people can pray. And I know you probably have some resources to help folks with, well, I know you do. You've got the prayer pond, but are there other things that you've come up with, tools and teaching materials that can help people find what those gifts are, or help them use those gifts?
There are a couple of things that sort of come to mind. First of all, you did hit on prayer, and I think that really probably is the most significant, because no matter how unwell we are, in fact, perhaps when we are most unwell, prayer is something I can do because I am sitting on the couch. I don't have the bandwidth to maybe have a conversation with someone, but I can, through my own heart cries, I can pray. And that undergirding of churches that needs to be done can be done by those of us who are most unwell and are in most pain. Going a step beyond that, sometimes it's about helping people to determine their own unique giftedness, just giving some ideas that maybe they hadn't thought of. In pain, sometimes being distracted helps a little bit. So maybe you never thought about that, because you can crochet or knit.
Right.
How about, just thinking about how that might fit within your community? Maybe you have someone help you connect with your hospital. This may have been pre-COVID when you could knit baby caps.
Right.
But, those kinds of things exist. Also tapping into, writing out their own stories. I'm not by nature a writer. Thankfully, Cindy is. But there's something very therapeutic about writing or bullet pointing, scribbled on a page, your own story. And that helps you to see where God has been faithful. And it also then, when you see that, can see, oh, when he was faithful there, this was something I could do. My own purpose is sort of revealed to me, or reminded me of where I've been. If you're looking for very practical, there are just so many things. You just kind of have to touch on, if you're a caregiver, then there are things for caregivers. If you are most in pain and it's physical, then we have, just some suggestions to get you started. Everything is really, there's the flyer that's called, Creative Serve, and we also have the webpage called Serve, just to get you started.
Okay, excellent. So, and if you wouldn't mind just telling our viewers what your website is?
chronic-joy.org.
Okay. And so the resources that Pamela just mentioned are on the Serve tab of the website. So there's lots of ways there for folks who, may be struggling to figure out where they can serve the body of Christ. So yeah, we think that that's incredibly important, and it's a valuable thing for every person. in addition to, the service that is provided. So you all have, I believe you also have awareness resources for those who maybe are advocates for people who are living with disabilities or chronic illness. So what kinds of advocacy resources or advocacy work are you doing, and what do you have to share with others?
Well, there's a tab on the website. What a surprise.
Okay.
Specifically for awareness. We have an ongoing and awareness initiative, I guess is the right word, where those little images are shown regularly on social media, just highlighting some of the broad impact of chronic illness. For example, 96% of those folks who have chronic illness have invisible illnesses, meaning there's no outward sign. Well, there's a social media awareness image and caption that helps people to see that. But those are all available on our website as well. And there's also full page, half page printables that list anything that we could find that was broad. Because remember, we're not specific like it's a broad thing. We cover everybody from the youngest, caregivers, parents, and marriage. So we're trying to collect some of the facts that makes the most sense for us, but they all are available on that tab, and they're also available on some of the individual pages. So if you hop onto the chronic illness page or the mental illness page, you'll find that this full page printable, but it's also it's a link that can be shared.
Okay, awesome. Well, so are any of your resources, you mentioned that you have a mental illness tab and then several other tabs. Is there anything that is different for folks who are living with chronic mental illness that you would like to highlight versus, what may be available for folks who are living with other chronic conditions?
I think, the needs have some similar, again, we look for broadening the perspective. So there are specific things on every page for that, whatever the particular thing is, whether it's chronic illness, mental illness, caregivers, parents. So on the mental illness page, there are specific resources, specific blog posts that folks have shared. There are book recommendations. Most recently, I wrote a post, which I'm not usually fond of doing, but I wrote a post about called Anxiety Hiding in Plain Sight. Because for me, I'd never knew that I was a person who had anxiety, but everybody around me did. Until I had that diagnosis, and while it's not something I'm not excited about that, but right. Now that I understand it, it's kind of funny. Everyone else laughs how I could miss it. But if it's who you are your whole life,
right.
So sometimes it's just looking for those relationship connections where we read blog posts from other folks who have something similar, or we can find some similar connection. Can just be so encouraging. And so that would be something, on that page that jumps out at me because I don't usually write. So.
Well, and we're live streaming right now on our Not Alone Parents Facebook page, which was in part created to help parents understand whatever they are going through, whatever special needs they're going through as a parent of a child that has these needs. They aren't alone. There's somebody else out there who has likely gone through the same diagnosis with their child, or has certainly had a similar enough struggle to kind of help come alongside and just let them know that they're not alone, if nothing else. And that can just be so incredibly just helpful to know that that you're not the only one in the whole universe that has ever seen or dealt with the emotions, the fear, the struggles that other people are out there, and they can give you encouragement. So
that was a foundational principle though from Joy way back when, is because so often when you go through something, you sort of gather, I use my hands and so it's hard to see, you gather this little pot of information, little things that help you to go through the journey wherever you're at. But so often they're the best kept secrets because you don't have another person to share them with. That's why Chronic Joy sort of began to this resource idea, was because we wanted that little pot of information to be accessible to someone else traveling a similar journey. They may not match exactly, but at least there's something that gets
Right.
you. And we find so many medical resources or treatment resources, but there's so few places that you can find resources that treat your heart issues, that help you through the hard. And so we want those best kept secrets, which are really hard to make them accessible to parents who are going through whatever they're going through. There's a whole page based on that. What a surprise. But the same idea, share those resources, pass it on to the next person.
Mhm. A few minutes ago, you mentioned something about marriage and anything, or something around caregiving, you know, and taking care of your marriage or something along those lines. Do you have tools specific to married couples and issues that they face when, you know, living either chronic illness in themselves or in one of their children?
We do, Catherine. In fact, a year and a half ago, I wrote a book called I Take You in Sickness and in Health. And it is designed for couples to do together. And it was very hard-won information on my part and my husband's. We came very close to losing our marriage. I'm sick, 4 of our kids are sick. We dealt with a lot of mental health issues because of that we didn't understand. And with the kids until we were so far down that road that they became almost more debilitating than their physical illnesses. And what we learned, we wanted to pass on to other people because we know how difficult it is. We've been married almost 28 years, and there were times that really the only thing that kept us together was that commitment. And we wanted people to know that sometimes it's okay to celebrate just that. If that's all you have, that's still worth the celebration. You know, today you got up and you decided to continue on. That's a good thing. You know, we put together as much as we can to help couples because it's very difficult, as you will know, to walk that way.
Yeah, that is incredibly valuable. So where is that resource or that information available on your website?
Front page, there's a big circle that
Okay.
says marriage, and there's a tab if you like tabs.
Okay.
We try to make it accessible no matter how you come to the website.
Okay, awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys have a tab for everything that is, you know, people are going to be searching.
It does.
Well, that's beautiful. I mean, you know, having it just laid out right there in front of folks is super helpful. So again, that's chronic-joy.org, and we'll make sure that we have links to some of these resources in the description after we're finished with the video and recording today. So we have about 10 more minutes. So please, if you're watching this on the Facebook live stream, do send your question before we need to wrap up. Or if you're participating in the webinar, definitely use the chat box to go ahead and send a question. Excuse me. So let's see. Like I said, we're coming up to the top of the hour. So if you had just a sound bite or a couple of sentences that you would like to leave the viewers with, just encouragement, it could be anything, you know, what would you say to those who are watching this today, or maybe in the future when it's posted on one of our various websites and social media outlets? You know, what's that encouragement that you'd like to leave that, you know, the person with chronic illness with today?
It always makes me, you know, when I start to think about it, I get emotional, but this is who we are and what we believe and what we have to internalize. Every precious life affected by chronic illness is both vital and purpose. And when we know that accessible, meaningful resources can make all the difference, enabling us to thrive in a life with chronic illness. Because we do really believe in this to thrive in a life with.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
I would just add to that we are never alone in our suffering, and it is never the end of our suffering.
that's wonderful. Yeah, so that concept of thriving, not just surviving or hanging on by your fingernails, is so important. It's so important for your mental health and your emotional health, just to know that there is purpose in your struggle, and that you're not alone in that struggle. So
In
if
that same idea of not alone, one of the great privileges Cindy and I have is to extend a real practical and tangible invitation of hope and compassion, and to help broaden people's vision of radical community. This book that I showed you before, Discovering Hope, Beginning the Journey Toward Hope and Confidence, can be requested for free on our website. It's part of our Gift of Hope program. There's a tab. And today, we've given away more than 2,000 copies to those who most need to know that they are not alone with the God.
That's wonderful. Would you mind leaning into the microphone just a little bit more? Yeah, because we're having a hard time hearing you there for a second. So if you wouldn't mind just repeating that last sentence, or the last couple of sentences, and hold up your book again, that would be great, because we don't want anybody to miss out on your resources.
I love to have to say this again. It's the best part. Cindy and I have the great privilege to extend a practical and tangible invitation for and compassion to help broaden the vision of radical community. Discovering Hope, Beginning the Journey Toward Hope and Confidence can be requested for free on our website. It's part of our Gift of Hope program. And to date, we have given away more than 2,000 copies to those who most need to know they're not alone and they're not forgotten.
Wonderful. And all of your resources are free. Is that correct?
With the exception of the follow-up Bible studies.
Okay.
The first one is free, but all the other ones are available for sale on Amazon.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent.
Oh,
Well,
and we also, and except for our note cards, we also, the beautiful artwork that you see in images and those kinds of things, they're also available in note cards. But as a self-supporting ministry, we do sell a few things.
right. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I encourage you, if you're viewing, even if you're not living with chronic illness, support what these ladies are doing. Get some of their note cards and send them to, families who have not been able to leave home because of this COVID thing. I mean, many of us have elderly parents who are not able to leave where they're living, or they're concerned about, leaving just with all the unknowns around COVID. So, these can be tools that people not living with chronic illness can also use and support this ministry that's doing so much to inspire and to really help people live out their purpose while they're living through the suffering that God has allowed in their life. So,
such a big pen to paper advocate. She's just going to tell you that.
Okay. Lean into the microphone again a little bit, okay, if you don't mind.
Cindy started out, Cindy was very ill at one point and lost the ability to serve as she had church.
So, lean in.
She began to write notes to folks. And that's really where the idea of pen to paper came from. Is we can make such an impact in someone's life by penning just a few words. And in fact, on our website, there's something called prayer and note starters. If you can't figure out what to write, or that's the reason that you say, oh, I don't know how to do that, we have some things that get you started. And if that's all you write on a note card, it's enough. One line, it's a reminder, a practical, tangible reminder that you are being thought of by somebody else. And it makes a difference every single time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and again, where can they find those letter starters on your website?
There's a tab, pen to paper.
Pen to paper, okay.
Pen to paper.
I love that. Alliteration is good to help you remember where to find things. So, well, we're almost at the top of the hour, so I'm going to wrap up here for the next minute or so. But I just want to thank you, ladies, both so much for joining us today and for sharing the resources that you have that are so thoughtful. I mean, that's just how, I take away your ministry is just so very thoughtful to the needs that people have and to helping equip people to find ways that they can serve, because both of those things are so needed for people who, you know, may be feeling just incredibly isolated and alone, particularly now with all of the COVID impacts. So again, this is Pamela and Cindy from chronic-joy.org. We'll have this video shared on the Key Ministry social media and also on our Vimeo and YouTube channels later this afternoon. So, you know, be sure to check out the Key Ministry events page for upcoming webinars, discussions, you know, video roundtable conversations that we're having. We have all of our coronavirus or COVID information on one tab on the keyministry.org website. So I encourage you to visit there if you're looking for ideas and resources for your church, your ministry, or for your family. And just, again, thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. You've got a lot of great things going on with your ministry, and just God's blessings on all that you're doing. So for all of us at Key Ministry, I'm Catherine Boyle. Just appreciate you spending your time with us today, and we'll see you back here real soon. Thank you so much. Bye.